1. Paul's inner struggle, a true portrait of a faithful heart. In one of the most raw and honest confessions in the Bible, the Apostle Paul writes, "I do not understand what I do. For what I want to do I do not do, but what I hate I do." Romans 7 verse 15. These are not the words of a spiritually immature man, but of someone who had a supernatural encounter with Christ, who suffered for his name, and who wrote much of the New Testament. Yet Paul still acknowledged a persistent battle within his soul, between the holiness he longed for and the weakness of his flesh that he couldn't conquer on his own. His words echo in the hearts of millions of believers today, "Why do I keep doing what I hate?" It shatters the illusion that those powerfully used by God never stumble. In fact, it highlights a powerful truth. Even those closest to God may wrestle with their deepest shadows. The battle you're facing may not be a sign that you're far from God. Sometimes, it's the clearest evidence that you're drawing nearer to His calling. 2. Temptation is not random. It's the battlefield of destiny. Throughout Scripture, there's a striking pattern. Those chosen by God to do great things often faced intense temptation. David, the man after God's own heart, fell into lust with Bathsheba. Joseph, destined to save a nation, was tested by Potiphar's wife. Samson, granted supernatural strength, was vulnerable to women outside of God's will. These weren't random failures. They were strategic attacks. When God plants a powerful spiritual purpose within you, the enemy doesn't stay idle. He targets the very areas that can destroy your influence. Like a general who never strikes at random, Satan aims where your impact can most threaten the kingdom of darkness. So, the battle you're in may not be proof of failure, but a sign that your life poses a serious threat to the enemy's plans. Don't take your temptations lightly. See them through spiritual eyes. If your battle is fierce, it may be because God's calling over your life is extraordinary. 3. The battleground of weakness, where God's power is revealed. Most people ask God to remove their temptation. But Paul reveals something deeper. To keep me from becoming conceited, there was given me a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan. But he said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." 2 Corinthians 12 verses 7-9. Paul prayed 3 times, but God didn't take the thorn away. Why? Because God used Paul's weakness as a foundation for dependence, humility, and supernatural power. The temptation you're facing might not be an unresolved failure, but a tool allowed by God to draw you closer to Him, break hidden pride, make you wholly reliant on grace instead of your own strength. This doesn't mean God causes temptation, He never does. But He is sovereign, and He can use even the darkest parts of your soul to weave a glorious plan. Remember, when I am weak, then I am strong. Weakness is not something to hide, it's where grace shines brightest. 4. Disciplined by grace, lasting strength in the spiritual battle. Many people fight lust with sheer willpower, discipline, and effort, only to fall. Others surrender, believing, "If I just believe in Jesus, I don't need to try." Both extremes are incomplete. The truth is found in the union of grace and discipline. Paul says something remarkable. "But by the grace of God I am what I am, and His grace to me was not without effect. No, I worked harder than all of them, yet not I, but the grace of God that was with me." 1 Corinthians 15 verse 10. Do you see it? Paul worked harder than anyone, yet gave all credit to grace. Grace doesn't just forgive. It empowers, trains, and moves you into action. Discipline becomes less about exhausting effort and more about the natural response of someone touched by true grace. You begin to pray consistently, not out of duty, but hunger for God's presence. You set boundaries, not to follow rules, but to protect what's sacred within you. Live a life of discipline motivated by love, not fear. Practice things like accountability with a spiritual mentor, daily meditation on Scripture, serving others to renew your mind, silent time in God's presence. Because in all of it, you are not alone. God's grace is fighting with you. 5. A new perspective. Temptation as a sign you're near your calling. Most Christians view temptation, especially sexual temptation, as a sign of spiritual decline. They think, "Why am I still struggling like this? I must not be good enough for God to use. If I were truly called, I would have overcome this by now. But what if all those thoughts are wrong? What if your struggle isn't a sign that you're drifting from God, but that you're getting closer to Him than ever before? In Romans 8 verses 28 to 29, Scripture doesn't promise that following Jesus will be easy. It promises that everything, including internal battles, will be used by God to fulfill His purpose in your life. For those God foreknew, He also predestined to be conformed to the image of His Son. In other words, the ultimate goal is not instant perfection, but transformation into Christlikeness, and often it's your very weakness that becomes the fire that refines you. Consider this. Paul wasn't disqualified because of his thorn in the flesh. David wasn't cast aside after his failure with Bathsheba. Peter wasn't rejected after denying Jesus. In fact, those very cracks became places where God's glory could shine through. You are not being rejected by God. You are being shaped by Him. Temptation is not a punishment. It's the battlefield where He trains you for your calling. So the next time you feel weak, ashamed, or unworthy, don't shrink back. Let it pull you closer to His mercy, strength, and eternal plan. Summary: you are being chosen for a greater purpose. If you're still fighting in silence, if it feels like you've failed more than you've won, pause for a moment and hear this. You are not excluded from God's plan. You are being prepared for it. God doesn't choose the perfect. He chooses the broken who don't give up. He uses the very places where you feel weakest to reveal His greatest power. Where you see failure, God sees ground to sow grace. Where you see temptation, He sees a warrior being refined. Where you see a closed door, He is opening the way to a greater mission. Don't stop in the middle of the battle. Don't collapse in shame. Rise in faith, because you are being prepared for something extraordinary. If today's message stirred something in your heart, comment what God is speaking to you. It might be the very word someone else needs. And if you long to step deeper into your calling, subscribe and turn on notifications. Every week, we share biblical truths to help you win real battles. You are not defined by your temptation. You are being trained to reflect the One who called you by name. Where you see weakness, God sees someone chosen. This is not the end. It's the beginning of a glorious journey.